And that's really the kind of thing that I've learned hanging out with these two guys. You know, in journalism, you have to be social because you're trying to get people to tell a story that often they don't want to tell. So you have to sort of try to somehow establish a relationship with them that allows them to feel comfortable telling that story. And what these guys said is just the exact same thing, except it's just another phase of writing.
Let me get a question out the way that I get all the time, because I talk both here in Savannah and the Atlanta campus. Do I have to move to LA, or do you work when I stay here in Atlanta, in Georgia, and make LA?
I think in terms of the sheer volume of work that's happening in Los Angeles, your probability increases a lot by moving to LA, because part of it is not, it's not just your sample, it's about your relationships, not in some sort of like secret, nefarious, nepotistic kind of way, but because to sort of what Noah was saying about how inherently collaborative this industry is. I mean, you're writing a screenplay, that's at best a sales document to get you a job that isn't making the thing that you wrote. Second order is you're creating, if you actually, someone wants to make that screenplay, what it is an outline for what a cast and a crew is going to do on a day on a film shoot. Which means that at least 50 people, usually more than that, 100 people, are having to work with you based on your words that have a lot to change based on the specifics of what is happening on the day, what location they can get, who they cast it. You're talking to dozens of people, and you're hoping that your screenplay is just the beginning of a conversation, which requires you to be intensely collaborative and also to be trusted. And part of that trust that you accrue comes from the relationships that you establish over time working in the industry.
What were your first writings like? The first thing you wrote trying to be a professional, and how does it compare to how you write now?
So the first thing that I wrote came from my days as a handbag salesman, and I got held up at gunpoint in a hotel room, and it was bad, and it was the kind of thing that I felt like I had to bear witness to. I was at the time trying to be a novelist. I would travel, you know, these back roads all over these, you know, well, I don't want to insult Oklahoma since I'm sitting next to a guy from Oklahoma. It's all good. Okay. These forlorn states. And I'd be you know, trying to write novels, and with no great success. But then this thing happened, and I decided to write as a way of kind of witnessing it. And I wrote it, and sort of immediately the voice that I sort of have now sort of just came pouring out of me, which was a kind of I've sort of, as it turned out, I was built to write nonfiction rather than fiction.
If you look back at that piece right now, would you go, this guy's pretty good, or, ooh, gee, these were pretty good?
No, the first things we wrote for where we were great. I mean, I think that looking back, you grow, you change, you experience life in a different way. So I think the things that we look back on that we wrote, we would say, oh yeah, you know, I would now come at it from this perspective because this is who I am now. I mean, that's really how Micah and I write, is we really have to find an emotional connection and a way in. So the things that we wrote then were very much who we were then. So it's a little bit like looking back on ourselves and being like, oh gosh, junior high was rough.
You know, very often people on stages like this will say to them, you have to find your voice. Describe your voice as a writer.
I think that the way that I write, I try to tap into emotions and to, you know, some sort of kind of inner world. But I sort of do that by being and by also risking sounding cold. I can be really sort of pitilessly objective, like in the Falling Man. I mean, it's an extremely emotional. This is a story that I wrote on 9/11 for Esquire.
Please find it.
It's an extremely emotional story, but the emotion is is kept in check and slowly released by pretty objective sentences.
I think that I was certainly raised to be intensely analytical. It's like reading comprehension. It's can I diagram and parse and use my head and my mind to dissect a thing, to break it into its constituent parts, and then sort of put it back together with a sense of logic. And I, for the first 18 years of your life, you're a professional student. If you go to grad school, even more. And a lot of your job is not necessarily to think creatively. And then you get to Hollywood, you get into the entertainment industry, and you're dealing with what is mostly an irrational art form with mostly irrational people. And the thing that, speaking for myself, that I have learned is to sort of drop down out of my head and into my body, into feelings, into intuition, to think less rationally and to think more emotionally. And if I can find that feeling connection to the work is always better. And so I think when Noah and I are writing, and he said this, it is about writing from a place of genuine emotion, and sometimes the words are almost an afterthought. The dialogue is secondary to, am I conveying the feeling that I want to feel? Can I take this thing that it's hard to even put words to, and can I somehow find enough words to get it into you, the reader, or into you, the actor or director?
I started as an actor, I'm still an actor, but I think that I come at writing from a point of intention and a point of need. What does the character want? What are they trying to get? What's preventing them from getting it? And so that's where I started. And I think Micah, like you said, started from this very sort of, can I say smart? I'd say very smart way. Micah's a smart one. He taught me brains and I taught him feeling.
It's true. It's true.
And so I think that's where I came from when I first started writing. I started writing as a way to keep myself from going insane between auditions, and then it sort of just started to take over, and it became like the two worlds started to meld together, which acting was writing and writing was acting, and now I believe that even more than I did then. And I think, Micah alluded to the fact that sometimes we don't even think about dialogue. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell a story visually while maintaining the dramatic tension. And sometimes that doesn't matter if we're writing like a big action movie or we're writing a movie that's about two people in an interview, which is what A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is. We're trying to maintain that tension and telling the story without any dialogue, just as a painting. And then we go back and put dialogue in.
I think that's one of the most interesting things about A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, because it's based on a story, or inspired by a story that I wrote a long time ago for Esquire, and I always thought that was sort of like one of the most openly emotional stories I've ever written. But these guys, I mean, that emotion is there from the very beginning. I mean, you are able to do that from the moment Fred Rogers begins addressing the audience. You feel it, and I still don't know how you did that.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the journey at Neighborhood. Did it begin as with the short story, or the bio movie that came out of the story, or?
So I wrote a story about Mr. Rogers in 1998, and then 16 years later, I got like the most surprising phone call of my life, which was from you guys, basically saying that they would like to try to develop a movie from that 16-year-old story.
And at that point, who were these guys? Were they successful at that point?
These were two guys who wrote on the, for Transparent.
Okay.
On Amazon.
Right. Hold that thought. I want to talk about Transparent because that's an entire journey in itself.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
That happened, you know, actually we were kind of working on this project, and Jill Soloway, who created Transparent, who you worked with on 6 Feet Under, is sort of a friend from the neighborhood. Again, you know, just sort of being around and being present is a big part of this job. And she said, hey, I've got this show I want to make. It's going to be a web series. It'll only be 8 weeks. And we're like, kind of want to work on this writers thing. And other things we got going. She's like, we're going to spend all of Amazon's money on good food. And the writer's room will be exactly 1 mile from each of your houses so you can walk to work. And we're like, 8 weeks? All right, we can do that in 8 weeks. And I think, you know, quickly we realized in that room that something special, something magical, something singular was happening. Maybe 3 weeks into the room, as some of these writers were sharing their stories, again, like a lot of these people were writers of a different kind. They weren't screenwriters. They didn't even have final drafts. They were poets. You know, they were short story writers, and Jill sort of plucked them from their lives and brought them in with their experience into this room. Like I said early on, we realized this is something really special, and that's right around the time the pilot came out, which Amazon used to do this thing where they would release the pilot, and people online could watch it while they're shopping for paper towels, and people didn't really like it. I mean, the people of the world did not like it, but the New York Times loved it, and New Yorker loved it, and sort of these publications that matter in this industry loved it, and it became almost instantly like a sensation that we were on then for, 4 years.
But like 6 Feet Under, being on one of those shows as part of the cultural conversation, what was that like for you?
I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, Noah and I were sort of like, I think many days we were the only cisgender straight white guys for miles on set, anywhere near set, it was an act. We were accidental members of a civil rights movement. We felt like we were getting a master class in radical feminism and gender studies, maybe 6 months before the rest of America got to learn about that stuff. So we felt an enormous responsibility to get things right. And what it did was, I think it really concretized kind of our approach to writing, which was to think about our work as screenwriters as a scheme to get paid to learn, and to think about how little we knew about what we were tasked with writing about, and to use being able to ask a bunch of questions, having a safe place to ask stupid questions of people who are willing to be patient with us, that the writing emanated from that sense of discovery. And I think that sense of discovery was part of what made the show successful.
Something that writers who are in film school don't get a chance to experience is being in a writer's room. It's having to share your toys that you said before. How is that different than writing on final draft in your bedroom?
Well, we're kind of a writer's room already. I mean, we don't really write by ourselves. We are constantly, when we're writing a feature, we break the story together in front of the whiteboard. We also have, an assistant often who's there, who's contributing as well, keeping track of the notes. And so we're huge believers in the writer's room. And I think that's one thing that we encourage people, even if you are if you are a screenwriter writing features, to create your own writer's room, to find those people in your community, or even outside of your community, that will give you pushback, that will challenge your ideas in a loving way. But to say, like, are you sure about this? Is this the best way to do this? You might be missing something, and that's free. Like that's free, and that makes your work better, and it makes your community stronger. It's funny, like we had our very first table read at this place where we used to steal Wi-Fi. We called it our office, but it was really just a place we could steal Wi-Fi. And they had like this big storage room where they kept all their tables and banquet tables and chairs and whatnot. And they let us, because we were always there, they let us use that room to have our very first table read for the Mr. Rogers movie, which was just our friends. It was just like our friends who came out and read the part and then gave feedback. And it was pretty brutal, actually. It was a pretty brutal experience. It was very moving. We were proud of the work, but it was like, this is not where we thought it should be. And then, so we're gonna have actually a friends and family screening in Los Angeles that Mike and I we just bought out a theater and we're having our friends come. And a lot of those people who read those parts are gonna come and see the movie together now, 10 years later?
Yeah, the poor guy who we asked to play the Fred Rogers part, we were not able to cast him as Fred Rogers.
Who'd you get?
We got Tom Hanks.
It's good too.
I guess I'll just add that, you're hearing this theme of like, have friends, build community, trust other people, and collaborate. Those are real lessons that I think we have that actually feel very true each and every single day. I think, and maybe you agree or maybe not, having spent a lot of time in writers' rooms even more than us, like when a writer's room is cooking, it's an incredibly efficient machine for identifying and eliminating bad ideas. Yeah, it's like if you're alone, you're gonna go down a blind alley. You don't know what's blind until you hit the dead end. But you're sort of tasked alone with sort of pursuing those storylines that aren't going to work. And what's so great about a writer's room when everyone's focused and dialed in is like, no, don't do that. Turn left right here because I can see a little further down the road on this one than you can, and you're like, oh, thank you. Recalculating.
Well, Tommy,
Yeah, I might want to write around.
yes, but Tommy, you don't have that experience.
Maybe not. All my bad ideas are on paper. First draft, second draft, third draft.
You have this experience. You have a little taste of wanting to join the.
Definitely. That sounds like a great and efficient way to do a job that's incredibly inefficient on my own.
I mean, think about what a writer's room now is. It's like you have 20 weeks, usually, to break all the stories, to write all the scripts, and then let's say it's not an expensive series, like maybe it's $5 million an episode. So you have a 20-week period.
By the way, $5 million.
I don't know, just a medium-sized series, right? So you have someone on with the math here. We have 20 weeks to write 10 episodes where you're spending $50 million of somebody else's money, and it's all going to be gone about 20 weeks after that period starts. So think of how fast you have to work and how sure-footed you have to feel, at least in part, going into that sort of insanity. I mean, we're building large corporations, spending all of their money, and then the whole thing sort of disappears until the next season.
Right, with time running out, I want to get back to the neighborhood journey. So you get a call from the Amazon transparent guys, and they wanted that your story.
Yeah. And so I went out there and after signing the contract, or I think we were preparing to sign the contract, went out there and
Why did you say
talked to
yes?
these.
What do you trust them?
Well, I didn't, but it sounded like such a great idea. And the other thing is that I really wanted, the minute you really started talking about it, I really wanted what you wanted, which was to somehow, Fred by this time had been gone for 11 years. And I wanted to keep his message alive. I wanted to get that message out there, and that's been one of the great beauties of this whole experience has been, getting Fred's message back out there. So that's what they wanted. So I went out there and basically handed them the keys to not just the story but my life. We gave them 2 days. I know we're out there. I was out there for 2 days. You asked me every question. It was pretty intense in that exact same place that you just described. And then you changed everything. But that's Hollywood. So.
Yeah. Did you write on Spec? Did you have a producer attached or any attachments?
All of that. Yes, at some point we did write it on Spec. We wrote it on Spec like a version of it, kind of even before we came to Tom, just trying to get it out there. And like a thing happened, just like as writers who were starting, an interesting thing happened in Bucky and I, which is that as we were starting this web series, Transparent, assistants at agencies had gotten a hold of our Spec script. Spec being like we wrote it for free and put our own time and energy, we never been paid for it. And they started sending it around to other assistants, being like, you gotta check this out, we love this is great, without ever actually really having submitted it anywhere. And we got on what's called the blacklist, Franklin Leonard started, which really was a moment for us that changed our career in a big way. Because
Fairly early in the blacklist.
Yeah, it was 2012 or 13. And what that means is that you get on this list of, I think it's, I don't know how many, 50 scripts or something, and then it's the most liked unproduced screenplays of the year, and that means that everyone in town reads your script. And while that was happening, Micah and I were totally unavailable because we were on this web series, and so and then it became not a web series; it became Transparent, and then everyone knew what that was. But when we looked up, we had created, by us being unavailable, a totally false and useless buzz. I mean, useful buzz that we were just super hard to get, and that we were super picky, and we kind of didn't even know what was happening. And we looked up and we're like, oh, I think we're cool. I don't know anything about us. And that's something that's completely out of your control. It was luck. It was luck, but it happened because we wrote this thing that people told us not to write. We didn't have the rights for. We didn't have any rights to do it, but we did it, and it ended up eventually that Tom Hanks said yes.
Okay, let me stop you for a second because you touched on something. I want to get to something very important. How much for all three of you is the course of where you are now determined by your hard work, and how much is by fate and luck?
Sitting here is complete luck for me. I mean, the journalism is a different thing. I mean, I've worked super hard at it and really pursued it. But as far as, I wrote for, I've been doing journalism since the 80s, and succeeded extraordinarily well at not having anything produced. And then one day I get this call, and it happens to be about the other lucky stroke in my life, which was meeting Fred Rogers. I mean, that came from an assignment, as you'll see, in the movie. That was pretty accurate.
Thank you.
I was assigned the story. It wasn't my idea, and they sent me out there to do this, and I met this, I met like Superman, and I became like Jimmy Olsen. And so those two things were complete, to me, strokes of luck.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to make your movie. It's so much easier for everyone to say no. So many things have to click into place, and I mean, for us, it's taken us years to be here. We still kind of can't believe that this movie is real. We like to talk to other people who have seen it so they can tell us that it actually exists, to verify it to us. But for us to meet Tom, for Tom to say yes, for us to find this director, for this actor to be available this year, for it to come out right now, those are all things that you could not plan or predict. But I think generally, to like extrapolate kind of what the lesson is broadly about sort of a writing career, in a very unFred way, I keep thinking about my friend who was super into women, and he was rejected by so many of the women he asked out. He's had the most rejection of anybody, but he's also had the most success of anybody because he just kept putting himself out there. I think there is no substitute for being prolific and for continuing to take the risk and just to put yourself out there and to not stop creating, and to not think of X or Y or Z project as the last one you'll ever do or the only one you ever can do. We wrote this screenplay, we went off and we made a TV show, and things just kind of kept simmering. And we didn't give up on it, but we were continuing to put material out into the world. And I think that's what can create something of a career, is if you don't stop creating, you don't wait for the world to come around to you. Your job isn't to be the person who wrote something. Your job is to be a writer in an active way. It isn't active, or you are writing.
Yeah, I would only add, I mean, over the 13 years, we've come to know a lot of writers who've had a lot of success. And I think that every one of them would tell you that luck played a part in their success, but there's no room for luck if you're not working hard. Every one of them is working hard, clearing space for that lucky moment to happen.
We're going to go to questions in a second, but a question for you, Tom. What's it like having watching someone play you?
Well, I kept on. I mean, the name of the character has changed because there's there's sort of fundamental differences between that character and White Global and me, and so I sort of kept on telling myself that it wasn't me, and then I saw the movie and I was like, Matthew Reese is playing me, and it was wild. I mean, I still haven't gotten over it. It's pretty cool to me. It's really cool, but surrealistically cool. It's like entering like a Salvador Dali painting of yourself. It's wild.
All right, now is your turn. However, in this question portion, questions are questions, not auditions, not pronouncements, not auditions. So if you have a problem making a question, I will help you. So with that, we will begin. You're all sitting west of me, so where's the first question?
I have a question right here.
Okay.
Hi guys, my name is Sonia Abrams. I'm a senior drama writing student here at Spec. So this is a film about Fred Rogers and his influence and how he affected so many people. How has he affected you, and how did you sort of come through with, how did you guys get the idea for this script?
Yeah, so this started 10 years ago, in January, 10 years, when I had a toddler and a newborn, a very stubborn toddler who I was trying to get to do really anything at all. And sort of in a moment of desperation, I put on a YouTube clip of Fred, and she like turned to the screen and was like, listen. And she listened to him, to Fred, in a way that she wouldn't and still won't listen to me, now as a 12-year-old. And I called Micah and I said, there's this warlock on the internet who speaks toddler, and we have to write about him. And then I think we got into it. We started researching and trying to find as much as we could about Fred, and realized pretty quickly that he wasn't going to be a good protagonist for a biopic. He's sort of an unwaveringly amazing human being, and that's not necessarily a good character to be writing about. So then we started looking at people next to Fred, people who had had their lives changed by Fred, which led us to a whole slew of people, one of which was Tom, who we read his article, and then eventually the estate, Fred Rogers' estate, sort of let us in and trusted us, and they opened up the archives to us, which was, all, I think, or most of the letters that Fred wrote, which are extensive. I mean, there was a Tom Juno box that came and sat in front of us, which was several hundred letters that Fred and Tom had written over the course of about 5 years. And I think when we read those, we were like, oh, this is where we want to launch from.
One of the movie is that it doesn't show him changing a lot of people. It shows him changing one person. But that's the way that Fred Rogers operated. It was person by person. I mean, obviously, I think that like the TV show obviously had a large audience, but the whole thing that he did with the TV show is talk to individual viewers, and that's what he was like in life. I mean, the documentary, the beautiful documentary that came out last summer, sort of shows how much he changed people and changed the world. But a lot of that transformation was started by him changing just one person.
Got another question in the back.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a junior dramatic writing student. I'm interested in what were some challenges of adapting a real event into a traditional narrative?
It's all challenges. It's only challenges, and your job is just to solve those challenges. Specifically, we, as Noah said, we had a subject in Fred Rogers whose life didn't conform to the structure of the 3-act structure of a traditional biopic. Isn't that funny that someone's life doesn't fit into a movie perfectly? But it didn't, and it also didn't suit our tastes as screenwriters. We're always looking for sort of a side window or a back door into the story. And so for us, unlocking this story was finding Tom, and finding that this story wasn't about Mr. Rogers. It was about a journalist who is going through some stuff, and he meets Fred Rogers in the course of profiling him, and Fred Rogers puts the pieces of his life back together. And then we had sort of broken that story, and we realized that we had written kind of a straightforward sort of Hallmark movie, and that wasn't quite right either. So before we sent the very first draft out, we devised this frame around the story, which is to make the movie an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that is about this journalist, which then allowed us to give our audience what we wanted for them to experience, which was the feeling of having Mr. Rogers talk to you, to spend time with you, to make a very special episode that's only for grown-ups. And from there, all the other problems were just business problems. They were the rights, the cast, the director, the waiting, the release, all these things that happen once you're sort of off and running. But creatively, those were the main things we had to solve for.
Again, like we said early on, like being a writer, a small part of being a writer is about writing. So getting the rights to this project took many years and many meetings of being a real person in a room with another real person, the head of Fred Rogers' estate or Fred Rogers' widow, Joanne, and just like being real and talking to them and saying, this is what we want to do, this is why we want to do it, and earning that trust. So we had to do all of that before we even got the chance to write it.
Good question.
Performing arts major. Mr. Rogers is obviously a very beloved American figure. What sort of struggles or anxieties did you face when you first came into the concept of the film and being able to adequately represent someone that pretty much all of America would fight for?
Well, I think that they just really sort of made it, they didn't really concentrate on his problems and issues. They sort of concentrated on my problems and issues. And I gave them a lot to work with. But I think that one of the really truly wonderful things about the movie is that Fred, you'll see in the movie, he never answers any of my questions, which is totally how it happened in life. And he flipped every question to make those questions about myself. And he didn't talk about his own backstory. And yet, by allowing that to happen in the movie, there's this buildup of emotion on Fred's part that just is released at the end, and it's really one of the beautiful bits of jiu-jitsu in the movie. It's wonderful.
See you tonight. Thank you very much, everybody.